Now what that means is that the D people and the P people were in conversation with each other, and they paid attention to each other, and apparently they recognized that neither tradition had a monopoly on the truth, so we will have to interpret. The other thing, then I'll be done with this, is it is now thought that if you read Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, the way we have it now is that it is essentially P. It's essentially priestly. And the way you can tell that is if people start out in Genesis and go to read the Bible straight through, they always quit in Leviticus. They said, I just can't do this anymore. Because it says the altar must be 30 cubits wide and 30 cubits high, and you got to have a pole on each side of the altar, and you got to have 10 rings on the pole and a partridge in a pear tree, something like that. So Genesis to Numbers is P, and then almost all scholars believe that Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings is Deuteronomic. So most scholars believe that the normative tradition runs from Genesis through 2 Kings, and the first half is P, and the second half is D, which means, if that's right, that each party recognized that they need the other party to help tell the story of faith. So I can imagine at the committee meeting where they finally put this together, chaired by Ezra, that the D people said to the P people, what do you got? Oh, they said, we got genealogies and rules and traffic codes. We got all these good rules. And the P people said to the D people, what do you got? And they said, we got this imagination about social justice for widows and orphans and immigrants. And Ezra said, good, we'll put that all in there. And then when you get ready to study or preach or interpret or live, you'll have to take all this material and figure out, like a kaleidoscope, how to turn it today. The problem with fundamentalism, a problem with fundamentalism, and a problem with historical criticism, and a problem with all of our theological, ethical certitudes is that we tend to think we've got the final answer and we don't have to turn the kaleidoscope anymore. So now I want to talk about how we live now. The way we live now is that very many people are discovering down here, but not yet up here, it's a gut feeling, that the way we set the kaleidoscope permanently doesn't ring true anymore. What we are seeing is that the world that we have learned to trust and manage and master is disappearing before our very eyes. We all know about the moral collapse in our society. We all know about the economic collapse in our society. Some of us, those of us who are older at least, know about the technological mystification. About, I don't know what you're supposed to do with all that machinery. And it's so humiliating to have your 3-year-old grandson explain it to you. We all know about the intergenerational misconstrual in which we don't know what the hell they're talking about anymore. We all know about how greed and violence have become normative and acceptable in our society so that we don't even blink anymore about the reports. And this loss of a world makes us enormously anxious. So I believe that the great pastoral condition in our society is anxiety. And what we have done is to gather our anxieties and put them on. So we say, who are the candidates to carry our anxiety? Well, how about gays and lesbians? If we didn't have gays and lesbians, everything would be okay. I do not think the anxiety about gays and lesbians, I think the anxiety about gays and lesbians has not much to do with gays and lesbians. Well, how about Muslims, for God's sake? They're all fascists. Which doesn't really fit with social reality. Well, how about immigrants? Oh yeah, immigrants. Taking our jobs away from us, when in fact the jobs are gone anyway. And Glenn Beck even adds to the list environmentalists, for God's sake. So my conviction is that the anxiety that comes out toward gays and lesbians or immigrants or environmentalists or whoever you think the list is a free-floating, amorphous anxiety that isn't focused on any issue, but it feels morally respectable to take it and put it on somebody so that you can express your anxiety with righteous indignation. So I imagine the body of Christ set down in this ocean of anxiety. And what I think is that the church and its pastors have access to this anxiety like nobody else. Nobody comes to the pastor and said, Pastor, I need to talk to you because I'm upset about the loss of the white male Western straight hegemony. That's not how people say it. You want to write that down so you can say it to your pastor? But it's the truth of our life. The white male Western straight hegemony that we have relied on is largely gone and in its last gasps of air before it disappears. Well, you might be pleased about it, but many people welcome that. Many people welcome that, but not the people who have controlled the old world and still control money and media and so on. Anxiety breeds a lust for certitude. Tell me something sure. Tell me something I can rely on. Tell me something that won't move. So I want to move from anxiety to certitude. Certitude issues in excessive conformity. Excessive conformity issues in denial. No, I don't feel that way because they told me not to feel that way. Excessive denial issues in alienation. I'll pretend. Pretend you're happy when you're blue. It isn't very. So the church is the happiest place in town, for God's sake. Excessive alienation issues in excommunication of all of those who are not with the program, and excommunication issues in violence. You think that makes sense, that sequence? You can adjust it. Conformity, denial, anxiety, conformity, denial, alienation, excommunication, violence. Tell me something sure. And the politicians and the media and the church that offers certitude is a big winner. Those churches grow a lot. But here's the truth of the matter. People who think they want certitude really want fidelity. Certitude is a cognitive category. Tell me something I can know. Fidelity is a relational category. Tell me somebody that I can trust. So I think there's a big tension in the church about the seduction of certitude and the difficulty of fidelity. And the church at its best practices thick, complex, conflicted interpretation with fidelity. So I want to comment on a book that I want to give you. And Martha Nussbaum, who is this great intellectual at the University of Chicago, has written a book entitled The Clash Within. It is an answer to Huntington, who wrote The Coming Clash of Civilizations, that we got to fear all the Muslims. And Martha Nussbaum went to, her specialty is India, so she interviewed Hindus and Muslims in India about the wars in India. And she figured out that the clash in India is not between Hindus and Muslims. It's between people who can tolerate the other and people who think they have to eliminate the other, who is unlike me, whether gay or Muslim or immigrant or whatever. And at the end of her book, she has these 2 pages in which she says, what I discovered is that the clash is not out there. The clash is within every one of us about our ability to welcome the other and about our need to eliminate the other. And the human process is negotiating that clash within in faithful ways. Now, do you see, if Nussbaum is right, and I find her to be right about my life, because I got a list of people that I don't want to be with.